Figuring out the direction that your game can go can be an overwhelming process. There are many ways that you can go about it. You get excited about adding all these features and ideas that come to mind. You start getting feedback from playtests and you hear some cool suggestions. And hey, I guess you should add some of these other things in it because, well, other games have this and you should too because people are going to expect that, right? It's a lot. The game no longer has focus and it seems like it's bloated with stuff that you thought you needed, but now you can't really keep up with. You can't figure out where it went wrong and why it's so hard to find what makes sense for your game. But what if there was a way to help find a solution to give you some guidance? Hey, my name's Charles McGregor, and I'm the founder of Tribe Games and the developer of HyperDot, an action arcade game where you dodge everything. I've personally struggled with this in the past, specifically with HyperDot. There are so many different ways and avenues that I could have gone down because of the nature of the game. How I could slot in a plethora of new mechanics and features. I wanted to figure out how I could focus and make educated decisions on art, design, music, etc., and make it feel like it was all cohesive. Well, what do I mean by cohesive? Well, really what I mean is all of the things inside of the game support and help the main idea or the goal of the game. The more obvious version of this is the art style. There are so many different paths and styles that you can go down and so many different assets that you have to create. Making sure that it all works together is important to giving clarity and identity to your work. But it doesn't only apply to art. You can also include mechanics, music, controls, narrative, etc. Having all of those things relate back to what's the main idea or the point of the game. A great example of this is the ramp. There was a clear and obvious goal that Paul, the developer, was going for. In fact, it says it right there on the description of the store page. It was created by a single developer to scratch a very specific itch, which is getting the vibes of playing games like Tony Hawk Pro Skater on the Game Boy Advance and getting in that flow state where you're just nailing your lines. There are no points, no unlocking, no missions, just free skating. And it shows how you can buck the trends of adding in genre conventions just for the sake of adding them in. It even subverts expectations from one of its inspirations. The point isn't to get a high score or complete missions. It's to get into the flow of skating and feeling good doing it. So then what about HyperDot? I personally had a ton of ideas that I could have pursued, and in addition to that, a ton of players who tested the game had ideas and suggestions. Add a dash mechanic, put in X modifier, the wouldn't it be cool if suggestions and ideas. Well, early on in development, I wanted to gain a sense of focus and use guiding pillars. These pillars are basically the whole goal of the game, or at least what I'm trying to get out of it. I didn't want to have too many pillars because then it would be overwhelming and I would lose focus, which is the thing that I'm trying to prevent. I also made sure that they weren't hyper-focused on a particular part of the game. That could lead to me making more of these, and those pillars wouldn't necessarily apply to a large portion of the game. So something like I want to have 4-player survival levels isn't going to apply to 90% of the game and is really more of a feature than a pillar. The goal of these pillars is to have something that I can look towards for guidance and ask questions to make decisions. With what I already had from the initial prototype, I came up with 2 pillars for HyperDot: flexibility and minimal. These were malleable enough to use throughout the mechanics and the aesthetics of the game, as well as being good to bounce ideas off of. An example of this is how minimal manifested in the form of mechanics. Using that pillar, I made the choice very early on to only allow for movement, nothing else. That was the mechanic that I wanted to explore because I felt like there was a ton to discover there. There was a ton of fun to be had using that limitation. So when people suggested add a dash mechanic or a power-up that would require the use of a button to trigger, I could ask myself, does this conflict with one of my pillars? Does this conflict with the mechanic of only movement? It did, but was I okay with breaking that? Was there another way to fulfill the desires of those people, or for my desires personally? Have I fully explored that mechanic yet? It didn't automatically answer those questions, but it did help guide me towards asking the questions that were core at the design. It helped me make some meaningful choices, as well as it helped save time on development, because I didn't focus on things that weren't core to the idea. As a side note, the other thing that this helped me with was that I was able to use the fact that you only had movement, and I could use the other pillar, flexibility. I can use it in terms of the inputs in which you control the dot, which eventually led me to things on accessibility, which then eventually led me to things like being nominated for the Game Awards, but that's another story for another time. With all that said, I still don't get it right all the time. I'm still learning myself, and one of the more notable clashes of me working with pillars is when I was working on Fingeance. Fingeance is a shoot 'em up that emphasizes roles on a team. With this game, I was the artist and musician, so I focused on those for my personal pillars. One of those pillars was to have the game evoke the comic book aesthetic, and boy did I struggle with this. For multiple years, I tried to find the best way to do this, trying to figure out exactly what I wanted out of the aesthetic, what I was trying to leave out. I didn't really want to go down the path of something like, say, Comic Zone, where the game was literally being played within the pages and the panels of a comic, but I did want to have something that when you looked at it, you knew that the art style was inspired by comics. It took me a long time to get to where it is now, 7 years in fact. But I do think that it is visually appealing, and it really got to this point because I focused in so much on that pillar. But do I think that it fully worked? No. I still get comments on it looking and feeling like a Saturday morning cartoon, which my brother loves to tease me about. Which, while I didn't completely nail the comic book aesthetic, focusing on it and asking those questions did lead me to have a more cohesive game overall within the context of the world. So, how am I applying this knowledge now? Well, in my most recent game, OmniGear, I'm trying to focus on what exactly it is I want out of the game. OmniGear is inspired by games like Custom Robo and Armored Core. It's a brawler where you have the ability to customize your mech and battle your friends. With that, I focus on the pillars of expression within playstyle and modernized PS1. So far, I'm still exploring things. I'm trying to find where they prop up throughout the design of the game. I'm testing new weapon ideas against this and seeing if you can express yourself the way that you like to play, trying to make sure that your playstyle is a viable playstyle. I haven't really touched the art yet other than menus, but I do think that it is invoking the PS1 era, but modern. I want to continue to explore and see where this takes me. It's harder this time around because I think that these pillars are way more discipline focused, so like art or design, but that's why I'm also interested in discovering more about them. Can I use these in different disciplines? Do they need to change? What really works? Are these pillars useful guideposts? Knowing where to trim off excess ideas, what ones to pursue, and what things are important is something that will take time to gain an understanding of. Game pillars are useful to help guide you through that process. You can start asking the questions that tackle the core of your design. You don't need to know ultimately what your game is going to focus on right out the gate, similar to how I am with OmniGear. Explore and discover what is fun and what speaks to you and your game. But remember to ask yourself, how is this supporting my main goal? Thanks for watching. I hope this helps you push past any roadblocks that you may have had or really focus on the objectives that you really want to achieve. Let me know what you think about the concept of game pillars in the comments and how you would use them in your work. This concept doesn't strictly have to be within games. This concept could work from really any other creative project or industry. But yeah, if you like this and you're interested in following along with me on my journey, consider subscribing. I'm going to be posting more devlogs, and I'm also going to be streaming to this channel, me working on games. You can also check out all the links to the games that I mentioned in the description, links to my social, like my Twitter @DarkAceTG, and the like. And with all that said, thanks so much for watching.